Avatar Emergency addresses the concept of the electrate counterpart or persona of one's being, one's identity. As much of Ulmer's previous works, particularly those dealing with Maestri, are very personal, it stands to reason that we should consider our identities. But not just our identities as a whole, particularly the part of our identity that lives on the internet. This is what Ulmer calls our avatar. Ulmer claims that everyone either is or is on the way to avataring. This concept raises an awful lot of questions, though. Ulmer states that the concept of avatar is a direct response to the institutionalization of electracy. This is the avatar emergency. What are our identities, and is one identity more real than another? Do we have any control over our identities? These are all important questions, but they are largely perhaps without answer. Instead, Ulmer seems to embrace the question, the uncertainty, and to use this profitably as a lens for further study of psychology and our being particularly relevant to the field of psychoanalysis. In discussing psychoanalysis, Ulmer makes connections between the talking cure and occupying the whole, and other kinds of references to ways that understanding avatar and otherwise conducting electrate research can help us to better understand ourselves. Overall, the benefit of these kinds of research is obvious. The researcher gets to know his or herself better, and then to use these revelations as a lens to add to a more broad social critique. After all, who do we know better than ourselves? In discussing Avatar, Ulmer brings up the notion of the body. After all, the Avatar is a sort of digital body. Ulmer argues that the body knows something because it enjoys the something. This adds to a sort of inscription on the body. This inscription is the lettering that gives this chapter its name. Our bodies seek satisfaction, urge and urge and urge. The thing that gives us satisfaction are triggers, and these can be mapped out, and this is the function of the concept of avatar. So, the function of avatar is to figure out what our desires are. We can glean as many things from what we do desire as what we do not desire. The especially interesting turn that Ulmer makes is describing the kind of understanding as a way of understanding the connection between prudence, fantasy, and policy formation. Like other things, the avatar is a construct. It is something that fits into the framework of whole logic. Ulmer conducts his way from one topic to another to explain just how much this koran needs to be filled in. The gap needs to be divided. The hole needs to be filled. Ulmer argues that electracy seeks to be presented not just in any way, but in a way that conveys wisdom. Wisdom. So then ultimately, it is up to you and I to conduct ourselves in such a way, if that's possible, to maneuver our avatar wisely, to map ourselves responsibly. To begin mapping the whole that forms this avatar, Ulmer explains Thoreau's Walden. Perhaps the most profound metaphor in this section is regarding looking at the pond into Walden, and in turn, looking into one's own self, the kind of subjective reflection and meditation throughout Ulmer's work. In doing this, Ulmer confesses to mourning literacy. This kind of confuses me, as literacy doesn't seem to have gone anywhere, but he does argue that avatar, something electrate, mediates the transition. But what this transition is that being discussed? Is it the shift from literacy to electracy? From being in real life to being avatar? I would argue that it's all of these things, and the idea that he admits to mourning literacy is quite powerful. After all there is change. Just ask Heraclitus. To map some of these meanings, Ulmer kind of rehashes the significance of subjective meaning. All of the personal stories he tells are largely the parts that lead to catharsis and provide the lens through which electrate research can and will be conducted in the future. One of the symbols that seems to be popping up a lot is that of the frog. From Homovik's amphibian to Bogos' equation of the Acaphaean to that of the noble frog to Omer's conductive dance on frogs and Francophilia. Frogs are quite prevalent within the kind of Omerian canon right now. I'd like to argue in favor of advancing this notion, but in particular, I'd like to argue in favor of the concept of the media user as an amphibian, one who switches between literacy and electracy without pause, one who works quickly and effectively in diverse media. This, I think, is one of the most powerful concepts that we can pursue today. Avatar Emergency wouldn't be complete without a Basho quote. Particularly in this book, I think Ulmer is seeking to rethink the way the Masters went, and to seek what they sought. Seeking new paths is of the utmost importance to the future of electracy, finding new ways to arrive, to explore things. This and other claims that are made in this book are very bold, but these claims are ultimately serving to construct the idea of electracy itself, so why shouldn't we be bold in our inventions? The worst that can happen is that something else will happen. Ultimately, the assignment of Avatar Emergency asks us to situate ourselves at the switch between the material framework and the way we are situated. But I think electracy begs this question as well. Who are we? Are we becoming electrate? And how are we doing that? And these, I think, are the questions of the day.